The sun was an unforgiving eye in the sky, staring down upon the endless stretch of desert with merciless intensity. Waves of heat rippled across the sand, blurring the horizon where red rock formations rose like ancient guardians of a forgotten world. There was no wind, no movement, only silence, thick and oppressive, save for the faint crunch of boots over gravel and sand. Ranger Elena Cross adjusted the brim of her hat and squinted through the glare. Her face, weathered by sun and wind, held a calm determination, though sweat traced silent paths down her neck. She'd spent years patrolling this barren land, searching for illegal poachers, watching over endangered species, mapping out wild horse movements. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was hers. It was her sanctuary and her burden. Her horse, Scout, a chestnut gelding with white-blazed pride, stood steady beneath her. His ears flicked nervously at distant echoes, something unseen, unheard by human senses. Elena patted his neck with a reassuring touch, though the unease in her own chest mirrored his. Something about today felt off. The air was too still. The desert too quiet. She pressed on, navigating through dry gullies and thorned brush. It was supposed to be a routine sweep, check the water holes, monitor any signs of drought-stressed wildlife. But deep in her gut, something gnawed. Maybe it was the memory of her brother, Cole, who used to ride beside her through this very stretch. He'd been lost to the desert 2 years ago during a flash flood rescue. His death still echoed through her every footstep, his voice still clinging to the wind when the silence stretched too long. A sudden gust kicked up a cloud of dust, stinging her eyes. Scout reared, startled. Elena tried to soothe him, but a loud, unnatural crack, like a gunshot or a rockslide, split the air. The horse bolted. She barely had time to scream before she was airborne, her body twisting in a blur of sky and sand. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Pain stabbed through her leg, a snapping sound followed by a white-hot explosion that radiated to her ribs. She lay still, stunned, gasping as the dust settled. Scout was gone. The sound of his hooves faded into the nothingness. Elena tried to move, but agony locked her in place. Her right leg was bent unnaturally beneath her. The radio on her belt had shattered on impact, the screen spiderwebbed and silent. Her canteen had been flung from her pack, its contents seeping into the dry earth a few feet away. "Damn it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She rolled to her side with a groan, her fingers clawing at the sand as she dragged herself toward the water. Every inch felt like a mile. The sun bore down with savage indifference. Her lips were already cracking, her breath shallow. Flashes of Cole's face drifted before her eyes, him laughing, urging her to push harder, climb higher, ride faster. She reached the canteen only to find it empty. The lid had snapped off. A mocking drop of water clung to the rim before disappearing into the sand. Elena screamed, not in fear but in raw frustration, a broken sound swallowed quickly by the desert. She was trained for survival, for worst-case scenarios. But this was something else. No radio. No signal. No horse. No one knew she was this far out. Her route had changed last minute when she saw tracks leading off course, a gut instinct she'd followed. "Stupid," she muttered, tears stinging her eyes. So stupid. The hours dragged. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent. Her leg throbbed with every heartbeat. She wrapped it as best she could with her bandana, but the swelling was already bad. Flies buzzed near her mouth. Vultures circled above, slow, ominous spirals that chilled her despite the heat. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind fogged by pain and thirst. Dreams mingled with memories, her brother's voice calling her name, her mother brushing tangled hair from her face, a wild Mustang foal she once saved as a young ranger, its frightened eyes locking with hers before galloping into freedom. Night fell like a curtain. The desert changed, what was blistering by day turned bitter cold. Stars scattered above her like ice shards. Her breathing slowed. She curled slightly to preserve heat, her body trembling. Sleep threatened, but she fought it. She knew if she gave in she might never wake. Then, the ground shifted. Not a quake, but movement. Heavy. Rhythmic. Hoofbeats. She opened her eyes but saw only stars. The sound grew louder, measured, deliberate. Not the mad gallop of Scout but something else. A group. She forced her head to turn. Out of the shadowy distance, a figure emerged, a horse. Then another. And another. They moved silently, their forms lit by moonlight, proud, tall, wild. Mustangs. Her pulse quickened. She blinked rapidly, unsure if it was real or another cruel trick of her broken mind. But no, she could smell them, the dry, earthen scent of horsehide and dust. Their manes whipped in the soft wind. Their eyes glinted with primal intelligence. One stepped forward, a gray stallion with scars across his muzzle and a presence that made the others stay just behind him. He was beautiful, terrible in the way storms are, or fire. Elena's breath caught. The stallion came closer. He lowered his head, sniffing the air. His nostrils flared. Then he took another step. And another. Elena's fingers trembled as she reached out, not quite touching him. He was close enough to see the flecks of gold in his eyes. She didn't dare speak. Didn't move. The stallion exhaled sharply, snorted once, then backed away. The other horses gathered around her, forming a loose circle. One, a dappled mare, lowered her head and nosed at Elena's shattered pack. Another nudged the broken canteen as if trying to understand its purpose. A young foal, barely weaned, stood beside her with eerie calmness, staring at her as though seeing more than a human should. Elena blinked back tears. Was this real? The gray stallion stepped forward once more. He stood tall above her, then turned his head eastward toward the horizon. And without warning, he neighed sharply, a piercing cry that sent the rest of the herd into motion. They turned and galloped away, their bodies vanishing into the shadows like spirits. Elena gasped. No, wait. But they were gone. All but the foal. The young horse stood silently, unmoving, watching her as she shivered in the sand. Then, slowly, the foal turned and trotted after the others, vanishing into the night. Elena let her head fall back. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, loud and slow. Her eyes fluttered closed again, her body broken, her hope flickering. And yet, something had changed. The Mustangs had come. And they had not run her down. They had not ignored her. They had seen her. She breathed in sharply, and through the pain, a spark of something stirred within her. Not survival instinct alone, but awe. Wonder. The wild had noticed her. And it wasn't finished yet. The stallion's hooves cut into the sand with purpose, sending small plumes of dust into the air as he halted on a ridge just above the place where the woman lay. The moon bathed him in a soft silver light, revealing a muscular frame etched with years of survival. Scars carved across his flanks told of battles long past, some against man, others against beast. His mane whipped in the cool desert wind, wild and tangled. His name, though no human had ever spoken it aloud, was Ashmane. He watched her from a distance at first, unmoving, his dark eyes fixed. The other Mustangs gathered behind him, 11 in total. Maras colts, a single foal. The desert was their kingdom and they crossed it as shadows, untouchable, unknowable. Yet something about the figure collapsed below stirred unease among them. She didn't smell like danger. She smelled like blood, sweat, dust, and something else. Fear. Fading life. The herd murmured in nervous snorts and shifting hooves. The younger ones wanted to bolt, to disappear back into the ravines where no man could follow. But Ashmane held them still. He had seen things. Known things. Once, years ago, he had been roped and caged by humans, dragged into a pen, beaten with sticks until he stopped rearing. But fire had burned in his heart. He escaped before they could break him. The memory remained carved into his bones, making him wary of two-legged creatures. Yet now he stood, watching one who no longer posed a threat. She couldn't even lift her head. The mare closest to him, a speckled bay named Vesta, edged forward. She snorted, lowered her nose, and carefully approached the fallen woman. Elena stirred, lips barely moving. Her eyes fluttered open for a breath, catching sight of the approaching horse. But she made no sound, no sudden motion. Only a look passed between them, one of disbelief, perhaps, or recognition. Vesta nuzzled the ground near Elena's hand and pawed at the broken canteen. Her muzzle caught the metallic taste of water residue, and she whinnied softly. The others approached, emboldened by her calm. They encircled the woman, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel her presence. A circle of protection. An unspoken barrier against the night. Ashmane descended the ridge slowly. His hooves struck the rocks with solemn grace. He approached her not as a predator but as a judge. She had wandered into their world, broken and dying, and now he stood in quiet verdict. He lowered his head. Their eyes met. The woman's gaze was fogged with pain, yet there was something steady in it. She didn't flinch. She didn't beg. Her breath came in weak gasps and a faint tremor passed through her fingers as she reached toward him, not pleading but asking. Not for help. For understanding. He stepped away. The foal who had remained nearby, a lanky golden creature with wide, intelligent eyes, lay beside her in the sand. Not touching, just lying close enough to share body heat. It watched her chest rise and fall with labored effort, its ears twitching at each breath. The night stretched on. Stars drifted across the sky. Coyotes howled in the distance, but none came close. By morning, Elena's skin was blistered and dry. Her cracked lips barely moved. Her mind wandered somewhere between sleep and fevered memory. She dreamed of her childhood ranch, of a time she had rescued a young colt caught in barbed wire, its screams echoing through the valley. She'd freed it with trembling hands. That was the day she decided to become a ranger. That was the day she learned that wild things remember. Now, it seemed, something remembered her. Ashmain stood watch over the herd as the sun climbed the sky again. He studied the horizon, then turned his head sharply eastward. The wind brought with it a distant scent, metal, oil, something artificial. He knew what it meant: humans. The ones with loud machines and long shadows. He had outrun them before. He could do it again. But this woman would not outrun anything. Not alone. Ashmain whinnied sharply, a sound of command. The herd responded. Vesta neighed back and nudged the foal, who rose reluctantly. A few of the Mustangs began to back away, unsure. Ashmain looked once more at Elena. She lay still, her breath so shallow it barely stirred the dust. A buzzard circled overhead, and Ashmain snorted in defiance. He turned and began to trot eastward. But this was not flight. This was purpose. 2 maras followed. Then 3. Then the rest. One by one, the wild horses disappeared over the rise, their silhouettes framed against the rising sun. Only their hoofprints remained, crisscrossing the sand like fleeting thoughts. The foal lingered a moment longer. Then it too turned and vanished. Silence fell once more. Elena stirred, her fingers twitching against the grit. Her face was turned toward the ridge, though her eyes remained closed. A single tear traced a line down her dirt-streaked cheek. Time passed. In the great hush of the desert, only the wind remained. It whispered through the dry shrubs, lifting grains of sand and curling them around Elena's motionless form. Then a distant sound. Thunder? No. Hoofbeats. Returning. But not all. Just one. Ashmain. He appeared again at the top of the ridge, alone. His sides heaved, lathered in sweat. Foam flecked his mouth. He had run hard. Too hard. Yet he stood tall. He turned his head slightly, scanning the land behind him, and then let out a powerful call, a shrill, clear cry that echoed down the canyons and danced across the dry riverbeds. And then he waited. Far off, beyond human sight, another Mustang was galloping through the dawn, reaching the old ranger station where a forgotten solar beacon still waited to be triggered. Ashmain's cry had been a signal. He had split his herd. He had sent the swiftest ahead. The desert, long a place of indifference, had listened. And the wild had made its choice. Ashmain descended the ridge again and returned to Elena, standing once more in silent vigil. The foal came shortly after, as if drawn back by some unseen tether. The sun climbed higher. Elena's chest rose then fell. And in her fevered dreams, a voice whispered, not her brother's this time but something deeper, more ancient. You are not alone. Ashmain lowered himself to the sand beside her. The foal curled close again. Above them the sky burned gold. Somewhere far away help was coming. But for now the desert had claimed her, and chosen not to let her die. Not yet. The wind howled across the canyons, flinging dry sand into spiraling ghosts that danced before fading into silence. The desert, vast and ancient, held its breath. A single Mustang thundered across the unforgiving terrain, his mane flying like a banner in the morning light. His muscles strained with every stride, but he did not falter. His name was Sirocco, the swiftest of Ashmain's herd. Behind him stretched miles of harsh earth, broken stone, jagged arroyos, searing flats that shimmered in the rising heat. Before him lay the hope of salvation, the old ranger outpost, long abandoned except for the emergency solar beacon mounted on its roof. The herd had passed it many times, wary of human scent and iron, but Ashmain had not forgotten. And now, with the fate of the dying woman behind them, he had sent his fastest runner with a command burned into instinct. Go. Sirocco flew over the sand like a wraith, hooves barely skimming the surface. His nostrils flared, lungs expanding with effort. This was no ordinary gallop. This was a race with death pacing just behind. Back at the canyon floor, Ashmain stood as an unmoving sentinel beside Elena. The foal still nestled close, pressed against her with tentative warmth. Ashmain had not left her side since returning, and now he watched the horizon for a sign, any sign, that his message had reached its destination. He was not a creature used to waiting. The desert demanded constant motion for survival. But something in the stillness tethered him here. Elena lay curled on her side, unconscious. Her skin was flushed with fever, her breath rattling quietly. Her pulse fluttered against her throat like the wings of a trapped bird. The crude wrap on her leg had bled through hours ago. Time was slipping through her fingers like the dust beneath her. Ashmain lowered his head and sniffed the wound. The smell of rot had not yet come, but the danger was near. He blew a long breath, then lifted his gaze once more to the open space ahead, as though willing Sirocco forward with sheer force of will. Far from them the stallion ran. Sirocco's vision blurred with sweat, but the landmark appeared suddenly, like a memory returned from a dream. The squat concrete structure of the ranger station loomed from the haze. Cracked windows, rusted antennae, and a sun-bleached sign reading Station 12, Wildlife Unit. The place stank of metal and age, but it was shelter. And more importantly, it held the key. The beacon. Sirocco circled the station, nostrils flaring wildly. He approached the side entrance where years ago, Ashmain had been corralled and held behind wire. He whinnied, loud and urgent, then reared up, striking the side of the building with his front hooves. The echo rang through the hollow shell of the station. Inside, behind a locked grate, the beacon sat mounted to a tall pole, its solar panel still catching light, a blinking red light signaling its idle mode. Years of disuse had left a crust of grime, but the panel's surface had been partially cleared by the wind. Power still trickled through its veins. Sirocco neighed again, louder, sharper. Nothing. Then instinct surged through him. He backed up several paces, then charged. His shoulder slammed into the weathered door. Again. Wood splintered. Again. A hinge popped loose. Again. On the fifth strike, the door collapsed inward with a metallic screech. Sirocco stumbled but caught himself. His hooves clattered inside the station as he stepped into the echoing silence of human ghosts. The beacon tower rose through a cut in the ceiling, its base bolted to the floor. A cracked switch panel sat beside it. The large green button marked, "Activate Emergency Beacon," blinked faintly, calling to him. He approached it slowly, then reared. His hoof struck the panel, sparks flying. The blinking turned to a steady glow. Then, with a faint electric whine, the antenna on the rooftop began to rotate. Back in the Ranger headquarters 10 miles east, a board technician jolted upright as a red icon flashed to life on his console. "Emergency beacon? Station 12?" he muttered. The signal was old but active. He immediately hit the alarm. Within seconds, rescue dispatch lit up. A chopper was summoned. Help was finally on its way. Sirocco bolted from the building, the sound of the activating siren ringing behind him like a war cry. He galloped toward the horizon once more, this time back toward the woman and the stallion who had trusted him with her life. At the canyon the air had shifted. Ashmain's ears flicked. He raised his head. Something had changed. There was a vibration in the ground, not hoofbeats, not wind, but mechanical. A sound the Mustangs knew to mean danger, or rescue. Minutes later, the distant thrum of rotors reached them. The helicopter burst over the ridgeline in a blaze of noise and motion, kicking up waves of sand and wind. The Mustangs spooked, but Ashmain stood firm. His eyes never left the machine. Inside the chopper, Ranger Tom Harris peered through binoculars. He spotted movement. Got her. South Ridge. And horses? He blinked, disbelieving. Wild Mustangs? They're surrounding her. The chopper hovered, then descended slowly. Ashmain finally backed away, his duty done. He neighed once, low and firm. The foal rose beside Elena and followed Ashmain without hesitation. Together they slipped into the canyon shadows. The rescue team landed and rushed to her. Dust churned around them. A medic dropped to his knees, checking Elena's vitals. "She's alive," he shouted. "Fading but alive. Let's move, now." They loaded her onto a stretcher, wrapping her against the cold. As they lifted her into the chopper, one of the rescuers looked out across the dunes. There was no sign of horses. Just hoof prints. Dozens of them encircling the woman like a protective barrier. As the helicopter rose into the sky, the medic glanced at Elena's hand, dried blood, fingers curled slightly. Something clutched in her fist. He pried it open gently. A single strand of coarse gray hair, horsehair. No one spoke. Above them the desert burned gold. Below, the wind swept the canyon floor clean. And far away, beneath the arching sky, Ashmain galloped into the wild once more, his herd at his heels and the foal keeping pace, as the world they had touched began to remember what the wild truly meant. The hum of fluorescent lights greeted Elena as she opened her eyes, sterile and cold against the warm, earthy dream from which she had just emerged. Her body ached in distant pulses, muted by the haze of painkillers, but her mind flickered to life like embers reigniting after rain. The scent of antiseptic replaced the desert air. The silence of the wild was gone, replaced now by the low, steady beep of machines tracking the fragile rhythm of her survival. A nurse appeared at her side, startled by the movement. Her voice was soft. "You're safe. You were found. You've been here 2 days. 2 days." The words struck like a gust of wind. For a moment, everything blurred again. Visions of hooves pounding the sand, a foal curled beside her, the shadow of a stallion standing sentinel in the dying sun. Elena tried to speak, but her throat rasped dry as bone. The nurse gently pressed a straw to her lips. The water was cool, startlingly real, and she drank slowly as if uncertain the moment wouldn't vanish. Later, when she was strong enough to sit up, Tom Harris stepped into the room. His weathered face was pale with relief. "You gave us a scare," he said, pulling a chair closer. "We thought we'd lost you." Elena managed a faint smile. "You almost did." Tom leaned forward. "We got the signal from the old outpost. Haven't used that beacon in years. But it was active. Something triggered it." She blinked. "The horses." He nodded. "That's what the chopper pilot said too. A herd of wild Mustangs surrounding you like guards. Then they disappeared." Elena stared out the window. The sky was gray-blue, a sliver of mountains far in the distance. "It wasn't just survival," she murmured. "It was something else. They knew. They chose." Tom didn't laugh. He didn't scoff. He only nodded again, slower this time. Weeks passed. Elena healed. But something within her had changed. The woman who had once combed the wilderness in search of lawbreakers and injured hikers now sat for hours watching the horizon, feeling every gust of wind like a voice whispering truths just beyond her understanding. She returned to the ranger station eventually, but only to gather her belongings. Her badge she kept tucked into her old saddlebag, not out of duty but as a reminder. She left without fanfare, driving westward, then south, guided only by instinct. Her truck bumped along unmarked roads until it could go no farther. Then she walked. The desert welcomed her back like a prodigal daughter. And in time they returned. One dusk, when the sun melted low over the ridgelines and the coyotes had begun to sing, she spotted them, at first just shadows. Then shapes. Mustangs. They moved with that same effortless grace, untouched by civilization. She didn't approach. She didn't call out. She waited. Ashmain stepped forward from the herd, his frame larger than she remembered, though perhaps it was the absence of pain that made everything clearer. His mane shimmered silver in the dying light. Beside him a foal, no longer clumsy, now tall, alert and proud. They looked at her as if seeing an equal. Elena let herself drop to her knees, not in worship, not in weakness but in awe. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. The silence between them held more meaning than 1,000 words. In that gaze she found forgiveness, for her trespass, for her arrogance, for believing the wild was hers to manage. Ashmain turned slowly and the herd followed. But the foal, now nearly grown, remained for a moment longer. Then, as if remembering her heartbeat from that night in the sand, it trotted forward, close enough to brush against her arm. Its breath was warm. Its eyes held no fear. Elena reached out, slow, respectful, and touched its shoulder. A moment. A bridge between worlds. Then it turned and galloped back to the herd. That night she camped beneath the stars. No fire. Just the open sky, the hush of the wild, and a peace that grew from something ancient. She slept without fear, her dreams free of fever and sirens. In the weeks that followed, word spread quietly. A ranger gone rogue, some said. Others whispered about the Mustangs, about the miracle in the desert. No one dared disprove it. Elena never spoke on news shows or gave interviews. She let the myth grow on its own. Instead, she spent her days tracking the herd, not to tame them, not to document them, but to understand. To learn the language of the hoofbeat, the wind, the silence. She watched from afar, her presence accepted but never dominant. One morning, as the sun painted the cliffs in gold and blood, she found a cluster of hoofprints at the edge of her camp. Fresh. A gift. A message. She smiled. And when she mounted her old mare, rescued from the shelter before the accident, and rode out into the shifting light, she felt whole for the first time in years. Not a ranger. Not a survivor. Something else. A witness. A guardian. A woman who had died in the desert and been reborn in the dust. The wild had spared her. And now she belonged to it.